There are stories people tell because they want to frighten you. And then there are stories people tell because they are afraid the truth might be worse. For generations, the women of the Whitmore family had carried the same warning. Never fall in love. Not because love was dangerous. Because, according to family legend, every man who truly loved a Whitmore woman eventually died. Some died in accidents. Some from sudden illnesses. Some simply disappeared. And after each death, the same thing happened. The woman they loved survived. Always. By the time 27-year-old Claire Whitmore learned the truth, she had already buried 2 men. And there was another man in her life. A man she was beginning to love. His name was Ethan. Claire had decided that Ethan would not become the third. Even if it meant destroying herself to save him. Claire stood on the sidewalk outside the hospital at 2:17 in the morning. Rain slid down the glass doors behind her. She had been sitting beside Ethan's hospital bed for nearly 6 hours. He was unconscious. The doctors had found a tumor. They couldn't explain how it had developed so quickly. 3 months earlier, Ethan had been healthy. Now they were telling Claire that he might have only weeks left. She couldn't stop staring at the reflection of herself in the hospital window. She looked exhausted. Older. Almost like her mother. Almost like her grandmother. And suddenly, she understood something that frightened her more than Ethan's diagnosis. The curse was happening again. She had seen it before. The first time was with Daniel. Claire had met Daniel when she was 19. He was the kind of man everyone noticed. Funny. Confident. Kind. He used to wait outside her college building just to walk her home. They spent an entire summer talking about the future. A small house. A dog. Maybe children. Claire remembered the first time Daniel told her he loved her. It had been beside a lake during a summer storm. He laughed when she started crying. "You look terrified," he had said. "I am." "Of me?" "No." She had looked into his eyes. "Of losing you." 3 weeks later, Daniel died in a highway accident. He wasn't speeding. He wasn't drinking. There was no mechanical failure. His car simply crossed the center line on an empty road. The police called it an unexplained loss of control. Claire called it the beginning. Because 7 years later, another man died. Michael. He was her closest friend. The person who had stayed beside her after Daniel's funeral. Michael never pressured her. He never asked her to forget Daniel. He simply waited. For years. Then, one evening, he finally told her that he loved her. Claire had wanted to say yes. Instead, she heard the words that had haunted her since childhood. Don't fall in love. The next morning, Michael died in his sleep. A perfectly healthy 31-year-old man. No warning. No explanation. His heart simply stopped. After the funeral, Claire's grandmother finally told her the family secret. "You need to stop blaming yourself," her grandmother said. Claire stared at her. "Then tell me what is happening." The old woman remained silent for several seconds. Then she opened a wooden box. Inside was a photograph. It showed a young woman standing in front of a mansion. She looked beautiful. Cold. Powerful. And furious. Her name was Eleanor Whitmore, the grandmother said. "Your great-great-great-grandmother." Claire picked up the photograph. What did she do? She fell in love with a man who didn't love her. The story had happened more than a century earlier. Eleanor had been wealthy. She owned land. A large estate. Dozens of servants. But there was one thing she couldn't buy. The love of a young stable hand named Thomas. Thomas loved a servant girl named Rose. Eleanor couldn't tolerate it. At first, she tried to separate them. Then she humiliated Rose. Then she punished her. And finally, in a moment of rage, Eleanor forced Thomas to publicly beat Rose. He refused. So Eleanor threatened to destroy his family. Thomas gave in. And Rose never forgave him. That night, according to family legend, Rose stood outside the mansion in the rain. She looked directly at Eleanor. And said something that would become the Whitmore family's greatest nightmare. If love is something you can destroy, then let every woman born from your blood learn what it means to lose it. 3 days later, Rose disappeared. No one ever found her. But the deaths began. Men who loved Eleanor died. Then men who loved her daughter. Then her granddaughter. Generation after generation. Until Claire. "The curse has reached you," her grandmother whispered. "You are the 7th generation." Claire felt her stomach turn. "So what am I supposed to do?" The old woman looked away. "Nothing." "What?" "You can't stop it." "That's impossible." "Your family has tried." "How?" Her grandmother didn't answer. Claire stood up. "How?" Finally, the old woman whispered. "By dying alone." From that night on, Claire stopped dating. She stopped answering messages. She stopped letting anyone get close. And for a while, it worked. No men died. No strange accidents. No mysterious illnesses. Claire began to believe that maybe the curse was real. Then she met Ethan. And Ethan was different. He didn't believe in curses. He didn't care about family legends. He didn't even know what Claire was hiding. He simply liked her. And slowly, despite everything she had promised herself, Claire began to love him. Then Ethan became sick. And Claire knew what she had to do. She went to a bridge outside the city. The river beneath it was black from the night. Claire stood there for a long time. She had convinced herself that her death would save Ethan. But before she could make a decision, her phone rang. It was Ethan. His voice was weak. "Where are you?" Claire couldn't answer. "I know you're scared," he said. She began crying. "Ethan. I need you to listen." "What?" "The doctor found something." Claire froze. "What?" "They made a mistake." Ethan's diagnosis had been wrong. The tumor was real. But it wasn't cancer. It was a rare, treatable condition caused by an autoimmune disorder. The doctors had caught it early. He could recover. Claire collapsed against the railing. For the first time in years, she wondered if the curse had been a lie. But then something happened that changed everything. Ethan asked her about her family. She told him everything. The curse. The deaths. Rose. Eleanor. The 7th generation. He listened. Then he asked. "Do you still have that photograph?" Claire nodded. "Why?" "Because I think I've seen her before." 2 days later, Ethan brought Claire an old newspaper. There was a photograph on the front page. An elderly woman standing outside a historic house. Claire stared at the picture. Her blood ran cold. The woman was Rose. Or someone who looked exactly like her. The article was about a local historian who had discovered new information about the Whitmore estate. According to the article, Rose had never disappeared. She had escaped. She changed her name. She lived for another 50 years. And she had left behind a diary. Claire and Ethan found the diary in an archive. The final pages were written in Rose's handwriting. Claire expected to see a curse. Instead, she found something much worse. A confession. Rose had never cursed the Whitmore family. Eleanor had. Not with magic. with a story. After Rose escaped, Eleanor became obsessed with revenge. She told every woman in the family that Rose had cursed them. She instructed them never to marry, never to trust men, never to have children unless they were prepared for tragedy. And every generation passed the story forward. But there was one more secret. The deaths had not been supernatural. At least, not all of them. Some had been accidents. Some had been illnesses. And some. Claire turned the page. Her hands began shaking. Some had been caused by members of the Whitmore family themselves. Women who believed they were protecting the bloodline had sabotaged relationships. They had lied, manipulated, separated couples. And in several cases, they had deliberately caused harm. They believed they were obeying the curse. But they were actually creating it. Claire stared at Ethan. So my grandmother knew? Probably. And she told me anyway. Ethan nodded slowly. Because she believed the story. Claire felt something inside her break. Her entire life had been controlled by a curse that might never have existed. But there was one question she couldn't answer. Why had Daniel and Michael died? Why had Ethan become sick? Why did everything happen after a man fell in love with her? Then Ethan found one final page. A page written decades later. By Claire's grandmother. It contained only one sentence. If Claire ever learns the truth, she must never discover who started the deaths again. Claire looked at Ethan. What does that mean? Before he could answer, Claire's phone rang. Her grandmother. Claire answered. There was silence. Then the old woman's voice whispered. You're reading the diary. Claire said nothing. You weren't supposed to. Why? Another silence. Then. Because the curse was real. Claire's heart stopped. What? You misunderstood. Her grandmother began crying. The story was false. Then what is real? The bloodline. Claire couldn't breathe. What did you do? Her grandmother whispered. We didn't cause the deaths. Then who did? The old woman answered. The men did. Claire looked at Ethan. He was standing completely still. Her grandmother continued. Every man who loved a Whitmore woman eventually discovered something about the family. What? They found out where the curse came from. And? They were silenced. Claire's blood ran cold. By whom? Her grandmother didn't answer. She didn't have to. Claire slowly turned toward Ethan. He was holding the diary. But there was something else in his hand. A small photograph. A photograph Claire had never seen before. It showed Ethan standing beside an older man. Her father. Claire's father had died when she was 6. She had always been told it was an accident. But Ethan had known him. For years. Claire stepped backward. Ethan. He looked at her. I'm sorry. Who are you? His expression changed. Not fear. Not sadness. Something colder. My father was Daniel's brother. Claire couldn't move. He spent 20 years investigating the Whitmores. And Michael? My family knew about him too. Claire's voice trembled. You came into my life because of them? Ethan nodded. At first. The room seemed to tilt. But then you actually fell in love with me. Ethan looked away. That was the mistake. Claire whispered. Why? Because I found the truth. What truth? He placed the final page of the diary on the table. Claire read it. Her grandmother had written the words years earlier. The curse doesn't kill the men. The family does. Claire stared at Ethan. Then she noticed something beneath the handwriting. A second line. Written in completely different ink. And every seventh woman is chosen to become the next keeper. Claire's heart began pounding. The seventh woman. Ethan looked at her. Was supposed to be you. Supposed to? Yes. Then who is the keeper now? Ethan didn't answer. Claire suddenly remembered her grandmother's first words. You need to stop blaming yourself. Not because Claire was innocent, because she had never been the one causing the deaths. She had been the bait. The family needed men to fall in love with her. Men who would investigate. Men who would get close to the truth. Men who could then be blamed on the curse. Claire's phone rang again. Her grandmother. This time Claire didn't answer. She already knew. The old woman wasn't calling to warn her. She was calling to make sure the final piece of the plan was complete. Ethan stepped toward the door. We need to leave. Claire didn't move. Where? Anywhere. Will they come after us? Ethan looked at her. They already have. A car stopped outside. Then another. Claire looked through the window. 3 people stepped out. Her grandmother was among them. She was holding the same wooden box Claire had seen years ago. The box containing Eleanor's photograph. But now Claire understood what was hidden beneath it. Not a curse. A list. Names. Dates. Every man who had ever fallen in love with a Whitmore woman. And next to each name. A cause of death. Claire looked at Ethan. What do we do? He took her hand. For the first time in 7 generations. He smiled sadly. We stop running. 3 months later, the Whitmore family secret became public. The diary was released. The names were published. The deaths were investigated. Several old cases were reopened. Claire's grandmother was arrested. But something remained unexplained. The night before the arrests, Claire returned to the old Whitmore estate. She entered the abandoned mansion alone. On the 2nd floor, she found a room that had been sealed for more than 100 years. Inside was a single chair. A mirror. And on the wall. Rose's name. Claire stepped closer. Then she heard a woman's voice behind her. You finally came. Claire turned. There was no one there. Only the mirror. And in the reflection stood an old woman. Rose. Claire couldn't breathe. The apparition looked at her with tired eyes. I never cursed your family, she whispered. I know. Rose shook her head. No. Claire frowned. You don't. The apparition pointed toward the mirror. Claire looked. And for one terrifying second, she saw something impossible. Behind her reflection stood every woman of the Whitmore bloodline. All staring at her. All silent. Then Rose spoke again. I didn't curse them. I know. I warned them. Claire felt tears fill her eyes. About what? Rose's reflection smiled. That one day, a woman would finally believe the curse was over. Claire froze. Rose whispered. And that woman would be the most dangerous one of all. The mirror cracked. Claire stepped backward. The room was empty. The apparition was gone. But beneath the mirror, carved into the wooden floor, were 5 words. The curse was never the problem. Claire stared at them. Then she understood. The real curse had never been death. It had been fear. Fear passed from mother to daughter. Fear disguised as tradition. Fear disguised as protection. Fear that taught generations of women to expect tragedy until they eventually created it themselves. But there was one thing Claire still couldn't explain. She had never told anyone about the words on the floor. Yet when she returned home that evening, Ethan was waiting. He looked frightened. Claire. What? He held out his phone. On the screen was a photograph. A photograph of the mirror. The same mirror she had just seen. But beneath the image was a message sent from an unknown number. Only 4 words. You are next, Claire. She looked at Ethan. Who sent this? He shook his head. I don't know. Claire stared at the screen. Then her phone vibrated. Another message. This one contained a photograph. Claire opened it. It was a picture of herself. Standing in front of the mirror. Taken only minutes earlier. From inside the room. Claire slowly looked toward Ethan. He was staring at her. Neither of them spoke. Because there was only one question left. If the room had been empty. Who took the photograph?